All right, guys. This is a rather difficult situation for me with this World Series, and I hadn't quite, I feel like I had to sift through some feelings, and I didn't imagine that I was going to have to sift through some feelings to watch the World Series, but I did have to sift through some feelings, and I realized that, so I grew up as a baseball fan in the era. When we were a proper country and there were two baseball leagues, right? Because right now we have two baseball conferences. They don't feel like leagues anymore. They play so many. I mean, they play so many interleague games that there's basically one going on at all times. Um, Everybody uses the designated hitter. There are two conferences. There are not two. There are not two leagues. And so it's interesting. Like I played the Immaculate Grid, and for those of you who don't know what the Immaculate Grid is, it's a game that you can play every morning, and it'll be different things, 3x3 square with different things on each axis. And so it'll sometimes be teams, sometimes it'll be stats or whatever. But what it normally involves you doing is playing a game where you try to remember a player that has played for two different teams. So did you somebody who played for the Red Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies? You could go Kurt Schilling, you could go Pedro Martinez. That's how the game goes or whatever. And I find that it can be really, really tricky for me if you ask me to do this with American League teams because I was a National League fan. And so I never actually paid any attention to the American League. So anyway, I had to try to figure out why exactly it was that I had this great level of reservation and rooting for the Blue Jays in the course of this World Series, right? And I thought about maybe there's a little Joel Anderson in us all. And what I mean by that is I noticed that when the Blue Jays are playing against the Mariners, for those of you who don't know, the Mariners are the only team in baseball that has never been to the World Series. Even the Rays, even the Rockies, even the Diamondbacks, all of them, they've all been to a World Series. Every team has been there except for the Mariners. And honestly, I found myself hoping that the Blue Jays would beat the Mariners in the league championship series just to keep that factoid on the board. That was it. Like you realize there's a handful of teams that have never been to a Super Bowl. Okay. Handful. I root for one of them, right? It's a lot more of them. Only one team that had never been to the World Series. And I kind of wanted to still have a team that had never been there. I don't know. It just kind of helped or whatever. So the Blue Jays had not won a World Series since 1993. And I was like, well, maybe the difficulty I'm having rooting for them in this World Series is because they haven't won a World Series since 1993. And I want to preserve that factoid because like I've hated the Dodgers my whole life. And then I realized, no, that wasn't the problem at all. The problem wasn't about 1993. The whole problem was about 1992. And for those of you who don't know about 1992, that is when the Atlanta Braves, fresh off of 2 seasons prior, where they had finished in last place, and they had finished in last place for 4 times in 5 years before starting one of the most underappreciated runs in team sports history. Anyway, they played a World Series against the Toronto Blue Jays, and they lost that World Series in 6 games on their home field. Canada was out here acting bad in front of us. And then I remembered why I couldn't get down with that. A friend of mine sent me some video from the little watch party they had for Game 6 at the Scotiabank Arena. That's where the Raptors play their games, and I saw them sitting in there. And then she told me how sad they was when they lost, and I was kind of like, "Hey, that's what you get." And then you know what? That wasn't even fair. You know what I mean? Like they didn't deserve. They didn't deserve. That's what you get from me. I would say though that a watch party for a Game 6 kind of sort of feels like chancing the fates. Anyway, it got us to a Game 7. And by the time the Game 7 had come around, I was squarely rooting for the Blue Jays. And I mean, it really came down to it. I've hated the Dodgers since I was 7. I only had some beef with the Blue Jays for a week or two, 30 years ago, right? Squarely in the Blue Jay zone. But at the same time, I'm also squarely in the Ohtani zone, right? I just wanted to see Ohtani do amazing things. It was very clear. I think Ohtani got on in the first. He was the leadoff batter, right? And he was also the starting pitcher in Game 7. Let's stop and take a moment to appreciate the fact that Mr. 50-50 started Game 7 of the World Series. Now, it was not long after he started Game 7 of the World Series that it was clear that somebody else needed to be pitching in the World Series because they was out here. They was making contact off your mans. And in the second inning, I forget who I was texting with, but I was like, oh, I was texting with the homie Tinsley. I was like, yeah, man, they can't throw him back out there in the third. That's the one thing I know they cannot do is throw him back out there in the third. And what is the one thing that they did? They threw him back out there in the third, and it went bad. 3-run homer. Had to get him out of there, right? So as this game is going, and it is cracking in there, I could not, at least I don't think of baseball as a sport where you think about how loud the crowd is. That felt like as loud a crowd as I could remember. Like it felt like a college basketball loud crowd. You know what I mean? Like it was just, I couldn't believe how cracking it was in there.
It was loud, and it was like a Duke loud. It was like on top of you.
Loud. Yes. Yes.
Like, yeah, not like a like there's like a difference in like the college football sort of, like it's almost cavernous in a way because you got the open air stadium, but in the college baseball they play basketball, excuse me, and it's just loud and they're intense and it's just every single out and at bat was so intense, and I think the college basketball comp's a good one.
Yeah, like I mean, it was nuts. But then it was a baseball game, and baseball. A friend of mine brings this up every time. Like he doesn't watch baseball like that. I'm sure he's listening to this, and we talk about this all the time. That baseball is such a perfectly designed and imagined game, but when you think about it, baseball it has like built-in rock and jock in it, right? Like when you don't think about it that much, but the truth is, like basketball doesn't have a 6 or an 8-point shot. Baseball has one of those, right? Like that's what the multi-run home run is. That it's got that built in, like force plays, the idea behind a force play and everything that evolves around that. It is amazing that the structure of this game has held up the way it has for so long because it's just so goddamn perfect. And it leads to such moments of not just great suspense, but the ability for everything to change all at one time. And the ability for a person who should not be doing something to flip things up to actually do it. You don't really get that many examples in the other sports of somebody who's not supposed to be the guy to get it done actually being the guy to get it done, right? There are not a whole lot of Bucky Dents in the other sports, for example. Part of that, of course, is 9 guys in a lineup. They're not all there to do the exact same thing. So, all of that, right? But there aren't that many guys who aren't supposed to be that dude who wind up being that dude. Also, baseball has something that the other sports don't really have, which is the slump, right? There aren't that many guys that wind up in situations where like, hey, what's going on? Hey, man, I've been dog shit for like a month now. Yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? Yeah, just been dog shit for a month. That doesn't happen. So how many other sports are there where you have a situation where somebody's been terrible for a month, has the ability to change everything, right? So who's been terrible for a month? This cat named Miguel Rojas was at the plate. I'm going to be honest with you, man. I ain't never really heard of that dude until this series got started. Sorry, I'll be there every day. But as he's coming up, and he's barely played recently because his bat has been so non-existent. And what I was thinking about is the whole way the broadcast kept trying to talk about whether or not Ohtani was going to get another at-bat, right? Is Ohtani going to get back to the plate? Is Ohtani going to get back to the plate? And then finally, he had enough of a change. Somebody had gotten a hit that was like, okay, we're going to get Ohtani to the plate. That is going to happen. And then I thought about it, and I felt like it was a terrible setup for our mans. Because at the way it was shaping up, Ohtani could get to the plate and at once not only make the last out in the World Series, but the way it was shaping up, Ryan, he would have also been the losing pitcher. Right. And I know how we are. We would have given him no grace for this. Because quietly, did he have a great postseason or an okay postseason with some great games?
Right. Like that's the kind of questions you start asking.
Yeah, like, but that's. I mean, it was a fair question to ask. Right. No matter what, This dude Rojas had, I mentioned Bucky Dent. There's Ozzie Smith with the home run in 1985. You can go through and get a few other people. This guy who's hitting in the 9-hole hits the home run that ties the game. And I am personally so glad that I don't root for the Toronto Blue Jays because I saw everything or heard everything change right in that moment. The next batter was Ohtani, and he hit what would have been the third out that would have ended the game if Rojas had, or it may not have ended the game, but no, actually, no, that would have ended the game. It would have been it. He just hit a fly ball to left field. My buddy Nick made the point that he can't think of any team that's ever come closer to winning a World Series that did not win the World Series. And I got to thinking about that. It made me think about 2002 when Dusty Baker makes the pitching change and lets the pitcher keep the ball. That my buddy Kirk will never forget as we watched that game together. And he is a Giants fan. And up to that point, the Giants had never won a World Series in San Francisco, and they chanced the fates. And the Angels wound up winning that game. The 1991 Atlanta Braves, though I guess they were only but so close. It was 3-2 after game 5. They went back to Minnesota. And Jack Morris threw 10 shutout innings. I mean, what can you do? Right? What can you do? 2001, the Yankees, it felt like, I mean, game 7, you're up, and Mariano Rivera comes in the game. I think that's as close as any team was ever going to be, thinking they won the game. But the game was on the road. This was at the crib, and it felt like they'd owned that game. And credit to the Dodgers for just keeping on chopping wood, right? Because it's not like they swung this on a grand slam. Little by little, just kept coming back a little more. And this is why you can't stop scoring runs. There was a 3-run homer in the 3rd. They scored one more in the 6th, and then they did not score again. That game, by the way, had 25 combined hits in 11 innings. 25 hits. That's the other part that can make baseball so interesting, is that it feels like everybody should have had a lot more runs after all those hits that we saw, but you couldn't necessarily string it together. Then we get to the postseason baseball thing. So what we got now is coming out of the pen is not these guys that ain't good enough to be starters. It's these starters that are too tired to pitch a whole game, but they just coming out there. Like, it's like every time somebody goes to the bullpen, it's like, damn, you drawn another face card, huh? Like, damn, we just drawing another ace until you get down to Yamamoto, who threw 100 pitches the game before. And he's the one that's got to shut this down. Right? I don't know, Ryan, if you saw that clip of right before he faces Vlad Guerrero, where he gives him a tip of the hat, and then it's like,
yeah.
He's like, shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw a few moments from pitchers where you could see it on their face. Like after it was done, like the Bassett dude, I think for Toronto, got to the end of one of those innings. And I've never seen this more clearly. Or maybe I'm older and I watch games differently. Like I'm reading emotions a little differently.
No, you could see the weight on every single pitcher's face in the extra.
Yeah, as soon as they walked off the mound, just like, oh, man, because I remember, like when I played baseball in Little League, and I was never going to be like no big league player, but I was like baseball was my thing, right? And I remembered like I was a decent pitcher for the levels that I played at. And I remembered how much I loved if you were rolling and you were standing out there and it was all you and you were in total control of everything. Because I always talked about this, that baseball is like such a great smart kid game, right? You know, if you had just taken the time to figure out everything else, your peers probably had not.
You have all these little situations that can only come up at certain times.
Yes. And if you watch baseball every day like I did, you knew them all.
Right.
And the other kids, not so much,
not a
right?
clue.
Like you knew how to play. But the other thing about baseball, especially as a pitcher, was everybody got short arms. So they all had to stand real close to the plate. And all you had to do with a little bit of control is keep hitting them with inside heat.
Right.
Inside heat was unstoppable. But I remember how it felt. But I also remember every now and then you get your shit rocked. And nothing ever felt more solitary and more lonely. And you the one that's got to pull it together. It's the closest thing to being an individual performer in team sports. It's both sides of that, being the batter and being the pitcher. It's me and you, and we doing this for everybody. And I remember how it would feel, man, when somebody tag you and you just out there by yourself. Like, as much as I like to joke, and we all do, about the unwritten rules, and it's like, well, if you don't like it, you need to just stop them from hitting the home. Well, look, sometimes it don't work that way. All right. Like, game recognized game. Just hurry up so we can get this thing to going, man. Like, I get it because of the solitary nature of it. And never before had I recalled just watching the weight on everybody's face in every single moment. It was so intense and it was so incredible.